Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another recording of the Startup Junkies podcast. My name is Caleb Talley, the Director of Marketing Events for the Startup Junkie team, joined by my co-hosts, Jeff Amorine and Matthew Ward. Say hello, guys.
Hey.
Howdy.
I am very pleased today to have Sean from the Strongarm Technologies team as our special guest today. Sean is, in full disclosure, he's not on camera with us yet because he is stuck in a tunnel, but we hope we'll be able to see him in just a second. Sean, tell us, what is Strongarm Technologies?
Hey, thanks so much, Caleb, Jeff, and Matt. Strongarm Tech is a safety science company, and what we're doing is creating a better future for industrial athletes, and we're doing that by driving real-time insights from wearable data that we're pulling off the bodies of the folks doing some of the most difficult jobs, and some folks doing some of the most important jobs, like just stocking our shelves. We do that all in a cloud-based platform, and the insights that we drive help inform a better and healthier workforce.
And so where did this concept for Strongarm Technologies come from? How'd you get there?
Strongarm is a company that's really close to my heart. I grew up inventing. I grew up working in the family construction company. I thought I was going to run that, but my father actually passed away on the job. So for the last 8 years, I've been obsessed with this problem. That is the $250 billion a year that's spent in injuries and the $3 trillion that's spent in injuries around the world. You hate to put a dollar figure to it, but that's how you get people to pay attention. During this podcast alone, we're going to see 30,000 people around the world go home hurt, and about 5,000 of them are going to pass away just from trying to put bread on the table. So with this pandemic-sized issue, for me, it kind of struck me as a difficult challenge that no one is putting the same level of intent, the same level of human-centered design intent you would for, say, LeBron James's next sneaker that he's going to wear on the court for 3 hours. Why isn't there that same level of attention to detail and human-centered focus on the people that are doing that same intensity, that same volume of work, but 6 days a week for a 40-year career, just to put your kids through school? So in order to get people excited about this, we said, let's focus on the biggest issues, the musculoskeletal issues, and let's see how we can really augment the human with some interesting design and compelling concepts that are approachable, but would really get people engaged. And exoskeletons were our first foray into that. So the exoskeletons we made, they protected your back when you're lifting, and they were passive, and we were able to sell more exoskeletons by volume than anyone in the world that we know of. And that sounds like a success, but the truth is it's a nascent category, and it was in the scaling of that business is where we found the real challenge in the industry. We found is that it's not that people don't care, it's the fact that people don't understand. We would go in and we would do an amazing study that had been backed by multiple universities as to the efficacy of the devices, but there was no way to actually quantify the metrics in real time. We were looking in a space where we had to do very highly analytical and observatory work. We would bring in third-party EHS groups, environmental health and safety, ergonomics groups. And what we find is that they were doing observatory sciences that were small sample pools and essentially data that was just too difficult to interpret, let alone drive a true ROI out of. So we said that's where the problem is. We need to have real-time data that can be tied to actual metrics of improvement in safety, but also to a dollar figure to help really drive an impact in the industry and get people to care. So to do that, we built our own algorithm. It's the most accurate means in the world of predicting a musculoskeletal injury. And then we needed to host it on a chipset, right? So as we looked around the world, we looked at about 70 different wearables, and we really just learned that we're going to have to build our own. And as we started to build that chipset, we learned that there's a great deal of other things that we can drive that are leading indicators to risk that we can avoid if we capture them. So all in all, we pulled in about 25 different sensing inputs that we packed into a small little sensor. And when we deployed that, we learned that we're doing much more than just providing a way of proving the efficacy of an exoskeleton, but rather we're providing true insight that we're looking for, the insight into the risk that those industrial athletes face every day. And it was at that point we pivoted the business and said, we're no longer going to be a safety widget company producing really cool tech, but really in a case-by-case, minute niche basis. Instead, what we're doing is creating a platform that drives true insight and then provides a narrative as to why every single person should care about that industrial athlete by driving insights to everyone in the value chain that impact their portion of the business. And as we've done that, we realize that's what we are. So today we've transitioned, and Strongarm is a is the world's leading safety science company. We've had over 35,000 people run through our platform, and we're reducing injuries now at a rate of nearly 50% year over year. And that's 50% of the people that we were protecting aren't going home hurt, and they're spending time with their kids. And for us, that's a success, and that's the narrative that we're running with. It's how can we drive real, true data that change the way we look at work.
And from that injury reduction, which is amazing, what is that translating to in terms of the economic benefit? Are the companies, clearly they want to keep their people at work and they want to avoid workman's claims, but what's the real, in average, what kind of savings are people seeing from a corporate standpoint?
The savings are exponential. We tap into operational gains. We tap into savings on the insurance bill, as you mentioned. What we really though focus on is just what the client faces right now, and we just focus on giving them direct injury reduction numbers. And what we're able to prove in a significant basis is an 8-to-1 ROI. That means every time a customer gives us $1, they'll see $8 back in savings that are earned from just keeping their employees safe. And a back injury can cost $50,000. An injury can cost sometimes just a few days off work. But sometimes if that individual isn't coming back to work, and you look at kind of the landscape, $12 an hour for your average per piece worker in a warehouse, it's going to cost $6,000 in back end to rehire, to restaff, and replace that position as well. So the economics of this really start to scale greatly for a client. But the value that we try to provide is the folks that you have, let's just save their injuries first, and that's the win-win. And we're delivering an 8-to-1 ROI over that.
Do you find as you've gotten more corporate traction, and you're in some great multinational accounts, and I mean your website kind of tells the story, but do you find that sales cycle is getting shorter and shorter now that you're out there and people are seeing it and you've got good case studies? How does that look for you?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the sales cycle goes, it's all about the data, and that was what we learned about the exoskeleton business. As we look back to that, we would have to wait for year-end numbers, right? We'd have to wait for the statistically significant studies to scale to a point where they last for at least a year, sometimes as low as 6 months, and then hope that the actuaries run numbers correctly and see those injury numbers happen. And we said we have to reverse that. These injuries are happening fast, and we need to keep up with them and develop the right forms of technology. So at the pace that we're in, it's about how can we continue to drive that insight ahead of the actual impact of the injury. So we spent a lot of time getting predictive. And what we did to do that is work with some of the largest work comp insurers in the world. So they've got the best books of data. And right now we work with the 5 largest companies that right now are holding basically the biggest bags of industrial risk. And that essentially allowed us to take over 150 million historical claims cases and pair them with our data and come up with a very high level of correlation. So what we're able to do is very quickly get a baseline of data during a pilot. We can do it in a matter of days. Sometimes our pilots are 12 weeks. And what we're able to do, though, is have enough statistical density to actually be predictive. So we're giving clients insights that they can believe in, that their savings are, and that greatly truncates our sales cycle. So the quicker we can prove that, the quicker we can get to market. And right now we're getting to a point where we can bonify our savings based on a qualifier. So we can actually start to really pre-sell in. So we're actually jumping in a lot of cases ahead of pilot stage and seeing much larger deployments on the onset. And that's all just thanks to a very, very complex time series database that we've built for our data.
Sean, where do you see Strongarm in about 3 years?
So in 3 years, there are a number of really interesting tracks that are going to merge for us. And that is a combination of our work with insurance and our ability to provide new products that are driven from new insights that we're creating. Our ability to then drive our technology into spaces that are other high-risk verticals as well. So we started in materials handling, and the reason for that was we can get very highly statistically dense, statistically significant study groups because the folks are doing very similar jobs. So if we would study a 10,000 unit workforce, it would be people doing very similar tasks, meaning that our data can constantly be tested over and over and revalidated. Once we did that with about 20,000 people in that field, we began branching out into new verticals. Our models can train themselves based on the insights that we see visually, pair them with the sensor, and now we've created a new job task. So we don't just have a sensor for everybody. It's a sensor that works in every uniform, but the firmware is uploaded specifically for that job task. So we'll know if you're a materials handler that's moving 400 packages an hour, or if you are swinging a hammer on the 3rd floor of the Chrysler building, and we'll alter the things that we're driving through our insights and through our sensors. So what that means for us is that we have a stage roadmap that we're building into each new vertical to be able to handle. And we're following which vertical to jump into based on the risks that our insurance partners are leading us to. So where we see ourselves in 3 years is really having a much broader encompassing of the overall risk landscape and really democratizing our technology into areas that aren't just extreme high risk, but also areas where the injury rate's a little bit lower, and the budgets necessarily weren't there. So injuries were often overlooked, but now we can really make our solution cost optimized to truly protect every injury that's out there. And our goal is to really find a way to eliminate injuries in the workplace.
I understand that y'all have kind of pivoted a little bit to address concerns for COVID-19. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what y'all have done in that space?
Yes, absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. That's an example of the nimbleness of the platform and our ability to adapt. So just as I mentioned before, where we would design a new feature for a new risk that comes up or a new form of a job task that has a different risk profile, we'd adapt it, adjust it, deploy the firmware, and have it launched on site for that client overnight. COVID was the exact same situation where all of the risks that we were trying to follow, we typically chase the hierarchy of needs with our clients in a continuous improvement plan. And that, in the wake of COVID, everything fell down the ladder and COVID came right to the top. So what were the top concerns were for our clients was top of mind. And their concern was, how do we get back to capacity at speed? And also, how do we get people to be safe while we're still doing this? Because a lot of the times, 3PLs and logistics clients that we're in are doing essential work. They're keeping these stocks shelved. So there's an obligation to keep folks there. But the challenge is, everyone knows the risks that are there. And right now, you can only manage what you can measure, and no one was able to measure this. So we stepped in first and said, first thing we can do is take some of the heat off the EHS professionals right now. Let's augment all of our safety features and all of their messaging through our Smart Dock. So our Smart Dock is the first kind of interface. Normally, it would produce outputs at the start of the shift to say, hey, Jim, yesterday your safety score is a 73. Tomorrow it can be a 75 if you focus on X, Y, Z. Instead now, that first bit of insight in that Smart Dock is going to deliver CDC information. Things like coughing into your elbow, maintaining social distancing, and even taking temperature readings and making sure you don't distribute a sensor, if they don't meet those proper CDC requirements. Next, it was how do we redesign the firmware to actually augment the sensors? And we were able to do two pretty straightforward things. One, we have Bluetooth radios built into the sensors themselves, so we're actually able to enforce social distancing. Anytime two users come within 6 feet of each other, they're going to get a buzz, it's going to light up, and it's going to increase intensity as they stay together. The next thing we're able to do is contract tracing, which is key as we're trying to get operations back up and running at speed. Because again, we're built on that time series database that we're able to bona fide with our insurance partners. That time series database means that we'll know every single person that a person of question has been in contact with throughout the entire length of question. So we can get right back down to every person they've come in contact with and get operations back up and running really quick. So again, solutions that we adapted to quickly, we deployed over firmware, and we're able to launch pretty seamlessly. And for us, that's the narrative of what safety should be. That's how all companies should be looking at viewing safety is having a nimble platform that can address the insights. Because at the end of the day, what we think you think that these warehouses, these construction sites at this point are built with the safety in mind, but the truth is the dynamics change so quickly, and it's the lack of information that leads to mistakes, and mistakes are the reason that these injuries happen. So Strongarm is there to just be, a watch guard, just a little guardian angel, a coach to tap you on the shoulder when you're about to do something risky.
No, it's very interesting. And the thing, having been in enterprise sales for things that target particular verticals, having that value justification where you can show either the reduction in costs or the increase in revenues is so critical. And one of the things that a lot of companies that I was involved with aspired to was to have the backing of the insurer. If you could show actuarial reduction in in incidents and therefore costs and therefore claims, it's really incredible to me that it seems like the insurers can really help make your acceptance into these corporate settings that much better, because they're going to give reduction, I would imagine, breaks on premiums and different things if people are buying your stuff and instituting best practices that will reduce claims. Have you found that to be, you must have found that to be extremely helpful, I guess, in the sales process.
It is helpful, and I think there are a number of different ways that this structure makes sense for both insurers and for the clients alike. The challenge with jumping into the actuarial pieces head first for us, which we started doing 2 years ago, is that it takes a lot of work. So a lot of the work that we've done was, in the background, was driving the right types of data, aligning the right types of partnerships to drive that validity in the data that we're collecting. And it all comes down to that. The goal here is injury reduction is a win-win across the board, and everyone can agree upon that. So now that we're driving a similar front of just reducing loss pick, reducing these injuries, but building a data set alongside of these insurers in a massive way, and then correlating that data has created a very strong narrative for us to do some very interesting things in the insurance space. But where the best benefit really comes from is that we can get a better handle on what risks to focus on. Where are the areas that are the most common injuries? Again, those statistically dense areas where we can drive repeatable insights from our data and drive better firmware onto our sensors to help avoid those injuries. So helping us locate with a better level of accuracy the environments in which these injuries happen, create a better all-informed system. So now as we're kind of marching forward, what Strongarm's been doing is moving an inch on a million different fronts. And as those different fronts start to converge into each other, we create a really unique ecosystem that is truly focused on a new metric, and it's really been a win-win for everyone, reducing costs for our insurance partners and reducing costs for our employers as well. And then our goal here is that cost savings isn't just fluffed right back down to the bottom line. Our goal is to help drive operational insights through our platform so that we can actually drive benefits that are focused on safety, but have an operational uptick, therefore justifying a better expenditure on those, creating a further win-win-win situation operationally inside of these organizations we play.
Another question along those lines, you all are one of the rare venture scale companies that have had individual angels. You've had early on, you've had a corporate strategic, and you've had venture firms involved. What's that process of communicating the value to the various different echelons of investors been like? I mean, I would say, and don't let this go to your head, you're one of the more articulate founders we've run across in terms of being able to tie things back to the data that really matters. But what's that process been like for you to raise capital?
So I really appreciate that, and as I'm here trying to turn on the video, so as promised,
out of the Holland Tunnel at long last.
Out of the Holland Tunnel. So for us, the challenge really has been the ability to find a single front where everyone can communicate on that. So just as you said, it's about we have a common goal, and everyone can agree that injuries are something that we should all put as a focus and solve. But you have to find the dollar figure, and that has been our greatest challenge: is how do you take a metric that is driven on solely creating a better future for the industrial athletes and driving it into operational insights, and then driving it further into the insurance insights. And the challenge there becomes is making sure that value is not misinterpreted in any way. So what we work very hard on is how can we operate again, on these different fronts in their own veins. And then as we start to merge them together, what are the common threads? So our safety score now has greatly evolved in that thread, because that the data behind it is now informed by financial institutions, to the likes of driving financial risk metrics. We've built those algorithms into the likes of things like FICO, but then driving the insurance metrics on the same side as we look at loss pick ratios and run rate and how they're calculating what that underwriting fee may be, and then driving that even further into just general EHS practice, and the resultant of which is really that is our differentiator. And that has been the most compelling thing for us running the business. Is we really started out as a safety widget company, right? And now that we've evolved, we touch so many different fronts, and we're truly recategorizing what we are as a startup. And that's brought the most conversation to the table, because the insurance space is looking for a product, but there are so many different fronts that you can't just lean on one. So now they're forced to create their own offerings, and those wrappers they create are usually a slew of technologies inside of them that you can kind of pick and piece and make a little magic portion for. But it's a challenge. And then if you look towards what the organizations themselves are trying to do, it's innovating on their own fronts based on data that they don't necessarily have and technology don't necessarily have a reach to. So for us to be able to be a front that is solely focused on one issue, the industrial athlete, and making them relevant in the future by driving value that is not seen necessarily, is our unique operation. We are that conduit, again, that is the narrative of why everyone should be investing in this precious part of the supply chain, and which is the industrial athlete.
Got it.
And it's got to be incredibly rewarding for you, obviously, to see your clients have that return on their investment. But also it's got to be incredibly rewarding to see the impact it's actually having on the industrial athlete. You mentioned, having family members that were in that space and making them more relevant. I'm sure there are stories you can point to that's has been rewarding and validating for kind of your why you do it.
There are, and I think the best example for us right now, and in terms of what it does for the morale in the business and what we're driven on, has been through COVID. So we went remote, right? It was a scary time. It was the first time our business operated completely remote, obviously, and there was a lot of confusion in the air, from clients slipping to how the market's working and upcoming fundraising, and just a lot of anxiety. Our team completely and solely was able to focus on what matters and keeping people safe. From day one, we were getting messages from our core clients showing that they are at 10x volumes, 3x volumes, 200% up volumes, but still their injury rates are trending lower. Even though EHS folks are now, their hair's on fire working on hourly calls, top of shift to figure out how to do contract tracing, we were able to automate and still have the platform run to continue to reduce injuries. And as we kind of looked at what those clients are doing, some of them were packing and shipping medical supplies to doctors in New York, and some of them were just keeping food in areas where, even if it's as simple as toilet paper shortages, it's still important and impactful work that we got to see in our own tiny, tiny way how we can have an impact on it. So for as a team to see that start to scale, and to see that now with the media attention behind it, the global impact behind it, and we really are finally on a stage where people can see how our mission to protect the industrial athlete has gotten its small stage in a small way. So with using that fire, we got through kind of the earlier ambiguity, and the team just crushed it in terms of being able to pivot and putting that same level of fire into now taking it above just doing what we normally do and keeping folks safe, but now keeping them safe in a new era from a different invisible enemy, which is COVID, and using our technology again. And now that we've seen those results, it's again back to impactful data. And your question before about, truncating the sales cycle, it's about being predictive and finding those new metrics. And what we were able to develop in absence of any real insights from the CDC or how to develop this is we put together our own cohort to figure out how contract tracing data can be impactful and what are the messages that you're receiving. And one of the insights that we drove is that the pings that you're getting from haptic feedback when you're too close to somebody are social distancing contract tracing features. The level of interactions between person to person And this is, again, kind of speaking to the fact that we're just like a little guardian angel trying to prevent you from making mistakes, a little coach tapping you on the shoulder. Within the first week, we saw a reduction of interactions by 50%. And by the end of the second week, a reduction all the way down to 85%. So we're seeing how things can work. We're seeing how we can adapt, and we're seeing how we can apply. And now that we have, these industrial athletes on the supply chain are the heroes of the moment, and the fact that we can apply our skill set to support them has been more meaningful than anything.
You touched on it a little bit, but talk more about that. It sounds like your team has a very resilient culture. Talk about that culture and you're obviously very passionate, have been touched by these issues directly from a family standpoint. Talk about the culture of the team and what you've done to create and nourish that.
Thanks. I appreciate you asking that, because that's something that we focus on in a big way. So the culture itself is first and foremost, no one's here for the dollar figure. No one's here for the fame of working at a startup. Everyone's here because we're doing really, really hard technology for a really good reason. And that is the sole thing that we're built on. Now, when the cool stuff we do, like staying up all night and being scrappy and driving prototypes out of the market at 4 a.m, are all kind of par for the course. But what we try to strive for as a scaled business now are, how do you keep that innovative spirit alive, and how do you drive innovation in a relatively small business compared to the types of behemoths that we're working with. And to do that, we had to start to implement metrics. So we use a core set of values, and those values for us happen to be a cool acronym that ends up being sacred. But those values are things like self-improving, and our ability to stick to those is key for us to hire the same people as we build that scalable business, right? But it's not just a handbook. That doesn't work that way, right? How do you actually teach people and encourage a culture that can hire the same folks around it that are mission driven? So what we do for that is we get really analytical on the data. So we ask for quarterly reports and quarterly surveys that exist both as company-wide surveys, but also for individuals themselves. And those data points help us track that, are we focusing on the right type of culture? So we live and breathe data. We might as well manage our own company by data, and we drive the insights that we're able to take. And it sounded kind of corny in the beginning, but we said, let's really give it a try. And it's been the most impactful piece to our business. We review them every time we have a fireside chat. And we talk about how we can constantly improve. So we are in a continuous improvement plan. We're finding new insights of data about how to make our own operations better. And that's how we're primed for growth, because the way that we've built it is, if you can have the confidence in the same type of value shared by all the individuals in your organization, you know that you're not going to have as many issues. The way that we find success in this is that when the person that is, the newest employee or the quietest employee, or someone who doesn't typically speak, sticks their hands up when they see something's wrong, and they're just saying, hey, that's not right, let's fix this. And it allows us to operate with a great deal of autonomy. We have hierarchy in place only in order to maintain some accountability on a project basis, but we're very flat, and that is really key. So sharing values and having a flat business in terms of structure really allows the innovation to drive, as long as those values are stuck to.
Great. Really good stuff. Caleb, you look like you're teeing up a question.
I didn't have any, one right off the top of my head, but, it's probably close to the time when we land the plane. And one question we do ask every guest on the podcast is, if you had the opportunity to go back and give some advice to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give?
Yeah, I get this question, I guess, every now and then. And my the biggest function, I think, is as an entrepreneur, is you have to surround yourself with opportunity, and you have to surround yourself with insight. And oftentimes those come in the form of advisorship. However, in the beginning of a startup, you get a lot of free advisorship, and then you end up finding yourself having way too much advice. And I think that the best advice to myself is that you've really got to learn that your value is in not chasing the right insight or chasing the right person or pleasing the right challenge. It's your value as an entrepreneur and as an individual leader is your ability to synthesize. to disagree with some of the insights you may get, to agree with some of the insights you may get, but to synthesize your own thoughts based on the information that you pull in is hands down the most valuable asset. So if I could go back 5 years to myself, is just really drive the confidence in that statement and drive the ability to learn to synthesize more than the need to network and please and drive different aspects into my pipeline. It's that piece of thought that makes you the entrepreneur that you are, I think.
That's a fantastic one to end on. Caleb, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to throw in one last question that came to mind. With the tech and the exoskeleton software that you have at your disposal, have you ever considered making like an Iron Man suit for yourself there in New York City?
Hey, man, we're in quarantine, so I guess what I get to do in my private time is my business.
We'll know when we see it shoot across the sky.
We've made some yes, I'm a dork. I flyboard on the weekends, which is like rocket boots, the closest thing you can get to Ironman in the water. And then we've done some this is probably for another podcast, but we have worked on some funky stuff with the military. So yes, we've got pretty close, but that's not where the future is. The future is in data and driving new work for labor.
That's great. If people want to find out more and they want to go deep, or they want to contact you about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to find you?
Strongarmtech.com. We're all right there. We're all easily accessible, and anyone can reach out and email us anytime.
Fantastic, man. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun watching you over the past several years build this business and take it to new heights. So congratulations on everything. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time.
Right. Sure thing. We'll see you.
Thanks, Sean.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.